Hey folks, Dust here, and I want to discuss a big roster move that's taking place in the Americas right now to end 2018 and go into 2019. And when I release this video, I'm not sure if there will have already been an official announcement or if we're just going off of reports that are, certainly valid. But either way, what's taking place is that Taco and Zeus were traded to Made in Brazil for Stewie2K, and on top of that, the new coach for Team Liquid in place of Zeus will be adreN. So essentially it's Team Liquid minus Taco minus Zeus plus Stewie2K plus adreN. Then of course Taco and Zeus going over to Made in Brazil, and then they are also going to have a new fifth coming in. But regardless, I wanted to talk about the Liquid side of it, and I'll do a separate video for Made in Brazil. And basically what I want to look at is, what is Liquid going to be like with Stewie2K as their fifth, and what is adreN going to be able to bring as a coach, and just kind of talk about the whole situation from the Liquid side of it. Now, of course, the obvious question everyone's going to ask right off the top is, did Liquid need to make this move? And of course, the answer is a resounding, probably fucking not. I mean, they were obviously the greatest team in North American CSGO history. One of the best CSGO teams in America's history. I mean, the only team that clearly is above them in America's history is, of course, the LG/SK lineup that had FNX and Taco that kind of played through the very end of 2015 to the very end of 2016. And then maybe the Phelps lineup of 2017 is going to be in contention as well. But this Liquid lineup that had Nitro, Elige, Naf, Twist, and Taco was indeed definitely the best North American lineup of all time, with one Brazilian added, and again probably one of the best Americas lineups as well, probably number 2, maybe number 3. But yeah, so when you consider it that way, definitely not. I mean, the only argument you can even make that they might need to have made a change is the fact that A, they couldn't beat Astralis. Do they need to make a change to finally be able to beat Astralis and try to become the number 1 team in the world? That's one side you could try to take. And the other would be, yeah, there would seem to be some pressure for them in finals, because it wasn't just Astralis they lost to in finals, though it was the majority of the time. There was, of course, for sure that one time against Mouse Sports at ESO1 New York, and there was a couple of other hiccups that they had, throughout 2018 between like April and the end of the year, whenever Taco joined the team, where they had a couple of really disappointing results. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But still, I mean, this team, I think, went to 14 LAN events and only placed outside of the top 4 times. And they made several finals, and they did have that one title at Malta. And then if you go back with the Steel lineup, they had the one title at CS Summit. So again, the only argument you can make against Liquid is the argument that they couldn't beat Astralis and the argument that they didn't get enough titles. But I mean, just when you look at everything else on their resume, it's like, of course, they probably should not have made a roster move. But I think the big thing I need to say right here, right now, before there's any more discussion about this, is Liquid did not want to make this move. That is very important to stress. I feel like some people don't really understand that. Maybe they will have understood it because maybe some more reports will have come out before this video gets published. But I feel like a lot of people are just like, what? Why is Liquid making this move? This is crazy. And of course, that should be the reactions you have based on everything that I've talked about. But the reality is, from what I understand from some of the sources that I have, is that this really was a move just predicated by the fact that Taco and Zeus wanted to leave and wanted to go to Made in Brazil and wanted to take that opportunity. And, the bulk of the players on the team and the Liquid organization did not want this to happen. Of course they wanted to keep their team together. It was a very successful team. Again, I already talked about that. So, of course they didn't want that to happen. Now, this is not a knock against Zeus and Taco, by the way. I'm not trying to, throw them under the bus or bash on them or anything like that. You have to look out for number 1 at the end of the day. You got to look out for in your best interest. And if they felt like their best interest was to go back to a Brazilian-speaking team, to make an all-Brazilian team again, to get back to their roots, to represent this huge brand for Brazil, which is Made in Brazil, to try to make that successful again, to take another step in their career, to take that next chapter, fair enough, that's what they decided that they wanted to do. I mean, it certainly stinks because you do have this great team that is really solid right now, and if you could just figure out the Astralis matchup, maybe you could get some more titles on the board. If you could get past some of the finals pressure, maybe you could just avoid Astralis sometimes and get some titles or what have you. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a great foundation there, and so to move away from that is a little bit of a gamble, because maybe Made in Brazil is not going to work out. Maybe if you're Taco, you don't ever have the same amount of success that you had with Team Liquid throughout 2018. So definitely some risk there, but you know what? That's what they felt they needed to do. That's what they felt they needed to do. So that's the reality we're in. So at that point, I feel like trying to argue about whether or not Liquid should have made this move is almost irrelevant, because they didn't want to. We just have to kind of look at the move that has happened, and then we have to kind of, just think about what could it mean, what could Liquid do going forward. Because the reality is that this new lineup with Stewie2K and with adreN as a coach has a lot to live up to. I mean, again, this Liquid team went to 14 LAN events. They only placed outside the top 4 times, so 10 times they got top 4 or better out of 14. They made 7 finals. Of course, they won the one title in Malta very recently against Energy. Then of those 14 events, Astralis knocked them out of 6 of the 14. So almost half the events they attended, they got knocked out by Astralis, 5 of which were grand finals that they got knocked out of. So that's, 5 of Astralis' titles do come off the back of knocking out Liquid in the grand finals. And then, of course, they knocked them out in the semifinals over at the Face It Major, I believe. Then the other finals appearance they got knocked out at was, of course, against Mousesports at ESL1 New York. They played 47 best-of-3/best-of-5 series across 2018. They won 28 and lost 19. But of those 19 losses, 10 came from Astralis. So still very successful against other teams in the world. When you look at the maps, they had a 78 and 55 overall record offline on maps. Of their 55 map losses, 24 came from Astralis, so about 44% of their map losses came to Astralis. Then, they had several losses to FaZe, some losses to Mousesports, some losses to Energy, losses to North. But really, the only teams that had head-to-head advantages over Liquid were, of course, Astralis. It was 24-4. So they played against each other 28 times. Like I said earlier, 24 of those maps went to Astralis. FaZe led them head-to-head 5-3 in maps. North led them 3-0, which of course there was that whole weird thing with North's lineup at the time, so it seemed kind of fluky. I mean, North even actually holds a head-to-head record over Astralis because of that whole Stockholm thing, so that one's a little bit of an outlier. But then they were tied with Mousesports in maps, and then they had a 6-0 advantage over Navi, an 11-6 advantage over Energy, a 6-0 advantage over Made in Brazil, which of course 4 of those maps came from the very first event Made in Brazil had Tarek, which was E-League Premier. And then they had series leads over Big 8-1, Hellraisers 3-1, Fnatic 4-2. So, outside of Astralis having a huge edge over them, and outside of FaZe kind of getting a little bit of the better of them, and maps at least, they were clearly one of the best teams in the world. The fact that they had a huge head-to-head advantage over Navi was really big. That's kind of what propelled them to be number 2 above Navi, who's kind of considered number 3. Their map pool was quite good. They were super dangerous on Cash, probably their best map, 15-3 record offline for 2018. Their only loss between May and then the end of the year, December, so basically that 7-month stretch, was the loss to Mousesports at New York. They had multiple wins over Made in Brazil. They had a win over FaZe. Their Dust 2 was okay. They were kind of 8-6 overall record, kind of went 1-for-1 a lot towards the end of the year. But 3 of the losses were to Astralis. So they were really like 8-3, I guess, outside of Astralis. They had some wins over Navi, over Big, over FaZe. Inferno, they had a 24-12 record for the year. This is their other big map alongside Cash. Of those 12 losses, 7 of them were to Astralis and 2 were to FaZe. So very successful outside of really the Astralis losses. They even beat Astralis one time, of course, in the group stages at the Major, had beaten Navi, had beaten Mousesports again. So very solid on Inferno and Cash. Those were definitely their top 2 maps. Mirage, they were an even 14-14. 5 of those losses, though, were to Astralis. They had some mixed results against FaZe. They had lost to Mousesports a couple of times. That's kind of the map that Mousesports seemed to have over them in head-to-head. But other than that, they had a really successful track record on Inferno against other teams in the world. Nuke is the one that's probably the most deceiving. If you look at their record, they were 8-10, but 7 of those 10 losses came from Astralis. They didn't really have that many big wins other than Mousesports a couple of times, but still, they just kept running up against Astralis because they would always let it through and pick ban, and they got punished for it. Then their Overpass was pretty mixed, 6-6 record, and their Train, usually a permaban, other than the one time they played it against Astralis at EPL Season 8, and they actually won it. So, again, really good results. Outside of the head-to-head against Astralis, they were doing really, really well. They were definitely number 2 to that team. They had a good map pool. They obviously had a really balanced playbook. They were one of the more, tactical teams in CSGO. They were kind of almost a mini Astralis in certain ways. The big differentiator between the two was that Liquid didn't have the same type of opper Astralis had, obviously. And Astralis' roles were a little bit more set. Like, they had set spots that were pretty much played 100% of the time in defaults, whereas Liquid were really more flexible with their roles because sometimes Nitro would go into entry fragging. We didn't have an op, so that would kind of shift personnel a little bit. Some maps, Twist would be a little bit more active. Some maps, NAF would be a little bit more active. And then vice versa, maybe they would be a little bit more passive on other maps or something like that. Taco on certain maps would kind of play the edge of the map. There was a couple of maps like Mirage where he was a little bit more actively involved in mid control and in the map. So they were a little bit more role flexible. And again, they didn't have the same strong opping presence, but they still did have that really good balance of, being able to play a default out really well, make those mid-round decisions, have really good team play in mid-round situations, bounce off each other with, good utility. They were actually one of the teams that were one of the highest rated in percent of deaths traded. So they're really good with their spacing and going in and doing good things. And they could throw in the fast-paced executes. And there was a couple of innovative executes they came out with at times, particularly on Cash. So good map pool, good record, good results, good tactics, good foundation. There were, like I said, some disappointments. like the New York final against Mouse, which was probably the biggest one of all, but I mean, that's still a finals. But there were also some bigger disappointments, like going out in groups at Cologne to Big and North, or, going out in groups at Marseille, which is their first event together. That was, of course, they lost the best of 3 the Gambit there. There was, of course, a couple of times they lost to Energy where it was a little bit disappointing, but they kind of got the revenge against them later at Malta, winning a title and beating Energy in 2 different best of 3s at that tournament after getting knocked out by them in the groups at ECS. So, yeah, I mean, really fantastic team. So this line does have a lot to live up to. Again, the only things that were against Liquid were a couple of these disappointing results I've mentioned, and then the fact that they just seemed like they were never going to be able to beat Astralis, unless Astralis finally beat themselves, or they finally got to avoid Astralis and actually get their act together under pressure in the finals, and which is the next issue, was they did seem to maybe struggle in finals a little bit, even when they weren't playing Astralis. Granted, the only real example we have to go off of is that New York final against Mouse Sports. Other than that, it was like maybe the semifinals loss to FaZe at Epicenter, you could point to as another like kind of pressure game they probably should have won. But I mean, again, FaZe has that lineup where if they're all clicking, they have so many individual skilled players that they can just beat you. I mean, they did beat Astralis a couple of times throughout the year, even I think one time of which may have been a stand-in at Sydney or something like that. So either way, it seems like there could have been a little bit of a pressure problem in finals, and again, the Astralis matchup. But other than that, a lot to live up to with Stewie2K on the team. And so this begs the question, what can Stewie2K do on this team? What can he bring to Team Liquid? So here's the deal. Stewie2K is replacing Taco again. Basically the same thing he did when he joined Made in Brazil. And again, he's not going to be the same player as Taco. He's not maybe going to be a guy who likes to play on the edge of the map or play more supportive or take more of a back seat. He might, again, get forced into some uncomfy roles like he was kind of being forced to adjust to on Made in Brazil. The thing is, though, he's still a pretty skilled player, and he does seem to have that mentality to, like, do whatever it takes to win. He does seem to really be driven to win. So maybe it wasn't necessarily just the spots he had to play that made him uncomfortable. Maybe it was just the environment. Maybe it was the fact that, communication was still an issue, even though they were trying to communicate in English. Maybe there was still some stuff lost in translation from the Brazilian player side of things. Maybe he didn't get along with, Yanko. I can't really know, so maybe in this environment with other players around him, with a different coach, maybe he would adjust better to these Taco-esque roles and play better. Not really sure. But maybe they don't even have to do that. Maybe someone else can take a back seat. I think what really is going to happen here is that there needs to be a balance found that will make Stewie comfortable and make him work in your team and let him have impact and maybe let him improve your team. But maybe you also don't want to rock the boat too much and really shake a foundation that already has proven success. What you're doing does work quite well. Your map pool is quite good. Your tactics are quite good. Players are performing well. Guys like NAF and Twists, for instance, the end 2018 were way up there when it came to, HLTV rating. I think NAF was like number 4, Twist was around number 9, Liege was number 10, I think. Nitro was somewhere in the top 20, I believe. So 4 of their 5 players were performing pretty well individually on a regular basis. So you don't really want to shake things up too much and ruin what you have that does work really well, but you still want to be able to implement Stewie2K in a meaningful way and not just make them fill all the Taco spots. I mean, I don't know. There's going to have to be some trade-offs and at the same time, some risk taken maybe that might set you back, but they could also propel you forward to where you need to be. So it's a really unique and a fragile situation when it comes to how you implement Stewie2K, because again, you could just give him Taco spots and keep everything else the same and keep what you have working, and maybe Stewie can perform on Taco's roles better, maybe at least on CT sides getting you more kills. I don't know. I mean, Taco certainly had a rough start when he joined Team Liquid the first few events, but it's certainly true the last 5 or 6 he was actually performing pretty well individually. So, and Stewie2K did certainly have his issues at Made in Brazil. So, is he going to be able to kind of get back to a form like he was at Cloud9 when people were really taking notice of him? There's a lot of questions to ask there. One kind of crazy thought I had is, maybe you let Nitro focus on entry fragging and you put Stewie2K as the opper. I think that's a viable choice to potentially make. I think it'd be very interesting. I think this already happens because Liquid does run 5 rifle setups a lot, and so Nitro would get put into entering situations with the AK. So just let him focus on that. Let him focus on being an entry in-game leader like a Glaive, like that type of combination, and then let Stewie2K pick up the AWP when you want to run one, but still maybe be more of a 5 rifle team. I think that would be one really interesting way to approach things, because this means that Stewie2K can be in your main control group with a Nitro and a Liege. And so when he is opping, he can be with you. He can op. Nitro can focus on entering with the Liege. And if you're running 5 rifles, you get to load in a Liege, Nitro, and Stewie2K to try to, entry into a bomb site. That is a very dangerous ball of fire to be thrown into an area to try to clear things out. And then you keep NAF and Twist playing on the edges of the map. these are roles that these players currently still play to some extent on certain maps. Like Twist will play outside of B on Cash, for instance. Naf can sometimes play on the edge of the map on other maps. Twist can play the edge of other maps outside of Cash as well. That's just want to give you one example. I don't want to get into like all their default spots for every single map in their pool. It will take me forever, but just want to give you an example that they do it currently, and they certainly have a classical history of doing it. Twist certainly did this on other teams in his past. Naf certainly did this for the bulk of his career in a team like Optic. It was really only Renegades was the first time Nav really kind of broke away from that and became like a second entry type player. So you put them on the edge of the map, they can still make plays, and when you want to do a 5 and execute, they can still be a part of the entry mix, but this will allow Stewie to be in a role that's maybe a little bit more comfortable for him and keep Naf and Twist positions they certainly are capable of playing, that they've shown that they can play in the past, rather than putting Stewie in the edge of the map. So this is definitely one thing to think about, but again, it's all going to come down to balancing, keeping what does work and trying to figure out a way to implement Stewie2K in a meaningful way. And like I said, maybe it can help them. I think one big area it can help them is giving him the reins on CT side a bit and let him be that X factor on the CT side. There were a couple of games, like notably Mouse Sports at ESO New York in the finals, where it seemed like Liquid were playing not to lose, and they'd be a little bit too timid on their CT side. Someone like Stewie2K, I feel like, can be that playmaker on the CT side. Maybe can do that a little bit more than Taco was. Again, maybe he can be a part of your double op setup. Maybe get Nitro rifles in his hands more. There's a lot of maybes, what ifs. That's going to be a big question that Liquid's going to have to answer with Nitro as the in-game leader, talking to Stewie2K and what he wants to do, adreN as a coach coming in, trying to figure everything out. There's going to be a lot here, but it could make Liquid better, but it could also lose some supporting factors that Taco brought to the table, and it can maybe put some people in uncomfy positions. So there's definitely going to be a lot of give and take on this one, but I think that Liquid shouldn't lose too much as long as people can get a little bit comfortable shifting a little bit, and they could maybe gain a little bit of firepower and overall skill, a little bit of an X factor on CT side, someone who's going to be a little more proactive and not just sit back and wait for the fights, wait for the game to come to them, and that could propel them to maybe get out of this habit of maybe getting a little bit too timid in games where they start receiving some pressure. So there definitely could be some benefits here. Let's move on from that and get to our final point, which is about adreN as a coach for this team. So right off the bat, I just want to let everyone know who's watching this that I do have a bit of a personal bias towards adreN. adreN is probably the player/former player that I'm probably the closest to in the scene. People who watch the stream will know this. We'll sometimes play games together on his stream. We talk a lot on his stream. We talk a lot privately, one-on-one as well, just, at night when we're just hanging out, we'll just kind of chill and talk to each other about life and whatever. So I want to just tell you that up front because I think it's important for me to do that, to be fair. That way I can be very transparent. That way you can kind of maybe take my opinions with a grain of salt and kind of understand where I'm coming from. First off, yeah, he's got big shoes to fill with Zeus leaving, because in many people's eyes, Zeus is considered maybe the second best coach in the world after Zonic, and certainly has a great history and track record as a coach in CSGO, no doubt about it. Definitely big shoes to fill. One thing that I think maybe he can bring to the table is a fresh perspective that they don't have, which might help them in the Astralis matchup or just help them in general going forward. And maybe he can just in general help Nitro out a little bit more tactically, because from what I understand, the last few months of 2018, Zeus didn't really help much tactically. And, just in general, I mean, publicly, Ali said in the Peaker's Advantage podcast episode that, Nitro was the one doing the bulk of the tactical work, and Zeus would certainly chip in and help, and particularly early on help with them set up maybe their initial roles and some of their initial tactics and stuff. But, after a while, it really was kind of Nitro taking the reins and really doing the bulk of that. And I think Elige was kind of one of the other main guys kind of helping Nitro build game plans. This is a mixture of stuff I've heard, kind of privately, and then stuff that I heard Elige say publicly on the Peaker's Advantage podcast. So I do think for sure, no doubt, people underrate Nitro heavily as an in-game leader. I think he did a great job running the team. You have to understand the coaching limitations that take place at tournaments on who actually gets to say what and when. And I think you had the E-League Premier Tournament where Zeus wasn't even there, so Nitro definitely didn't have his help in that tournament. They still made the finals, again, lost to Astralis like they've done 4 other times outside of that. So I do think that people maybe don't give Nitro enough credit as a tactician, as an in-game leader, as a guy who builds tactics, and maybe getting assistance from Elige. Not to say that Zeus didn't pitch in tactically. I'm sure there were some things that he brought to the table. I remember he definitely came up with one of their cash executes for sure, because it was something that SK used to run when he was coaching that team. So I'm sure he did bring things to the table. There's no question about that. And I do think that, if anything, Zeus is probably good at player management, managing personalities, helping keep people disciplined, maybe set up their practice schedule, their practice regimen, keeping people on task, being able to pitch in a fresh perspective during timeouts. Again, I'm not in any way trying to devalue Zeus as a coach, but I do think that maybe some people almost feel like he held Nitro's hand all the time and babied him and taught Nitro everything that he knows. And without Zeus, Nitro is going to lose everything, and this team's going to lose all of its tactics and all of its, tactical ability. And I think that, that's obviously an exaggeration, just as much of an exaggeration to say that Zeus is a worthless coach or something. Like, none of those things are true. So, again, I think Zeus did bring a lot to the table, but I do think that maybe people undervalue Nitro a little bit. And I do think that maybe adreN can help a little bit more tactically than Zeus did. I mean, he is a former player for many, many years, going back to Counter-Strike Source and through CSGO. Definitely has a great mind for the game. You can definitely see that in some of his YouTube videos that he's put out. I think people have really taken notice of that. And maybe some of his analyst desk work. I think he did a couple of analyst desks, and you can kind of hear like his in-game IQ is definitely very high. And so I do think that, he can maybe help tactically a little bit more than Zeus was maybe doing. Again, I can't know 100% sure how much Zeus helped tactically, but just from what I glean, it seems like it wasn't as much as maybe people think. Maybe he was more of a coach and really helpful in other areas. So that is one thing I think that adreN might be able to do. I do worry a little bit about adreN as a manager of players, and I know that he can tend at times to kind of tilt a little bit, and that's exactly what Liquid does not need. They need like an anti-tilt, and so he has to kind of maybe shift this mentality a little bit and be kind of that emotional support factor to try to keep them from, getting heated, keep them from blowing up. One thing is he does definitely know these players very well. He's played with, many of these players, obviously, like in Pugs and Scrim, stuff like that, but he used to play alongside Nitro and Leash for quite a long time. He helped really set those players up early on to kind of teach them a little bit about the game, because before they played with adreN, they didn't really have that much experience when he was the in-game leader of Liquid way back when, this is 2015. Naf was on that team as well for a little bit of that. He was one of the ones that got kind of removed a little bit later on, and Nitro and Leash kind of stuck with adreN for longer. But yeah, he definitely has a history with these players. These guys know him, so maybe that's going to help out a little bit, that they kind of know each other a little bit better. But again, I do worry maybe that could come into being a problem. Maybe they're a little bit too much of friends, so maybe that could make things a little bit tougher. So there's a lot of give and take there. And I think he also has to be careful not to neuter Nitro and not to rock the boat too much. I mean, you want to add a fresh perspective, you want to help him. But again, he's already doing a pretty good job with the system that Liquid has. And this goes back to what I was saying about adding Stewie2K and implementing him and not wanting to rock the boat there. It's the same here with adreN. I feel like he's going to want to watch demos, maybe help them counter-strat a little bit, help them add some more stuff to their playbook, help them figure out exactly how they want to use Stewie2K, be a part of that decision-making process with Nitro and Stewie. But again, you don't want to neuter Nitro because, again, it seems like he knows what the fuck he's doing. He's doing a pretty good job. Definitely has the knowledge and experience to help out this team, but it's just going to be about whether or not he has the skills as a coach and the traits as a coach to be powerful in that role. So I think a lot of people are still it's really a mystery, I guess I should say, on how coaching should actually work, who's actually good at it, because you have to really rely on just what you hear in interviews and what you hear behind the scenes. It's really hard to see it apparent on the server because there's no stats or something about coaching, you know what I mean? So it's all very confusing. I'll also just add this at the very end about adreN. Not sure how much this is going to be relevant to people, but I know he's hungry for this opportunity, and he's been hungry for a change in his life, and I think he's going to be very passionate about taking this position. People see him stream and play on Mythic. He's been doing that for a while, but I can tell you from talking to him that he's really been hunting for something else, that he really felt like he had hit a wall with streaming, where he had really plateaued and he didn't really know what he wanted to do anymore. And he was kind of hating streaming CS, and he wanted to stream other games, but it was hard to because he'd lose viewership. And he was really kind of at a crossroads in his life where he felt like he had kind of hit a wall in streaming and playing on Mythic. And yeah, Mythic was fun and all, but it wasn't like a serious competitive team. They just play a Mountain Dew League. They stream all their stuff. Yeah, they practice, sure, but it's not to the same degree as one of these professional organizations. And so I think that he still had that competitive itch. He was looking for a new challenge. He was looking for a fresh thing to do in his life, and this coaching opportunity is that. So I really think that he's going to, really take this task on and give it his all, and I think he's really going to be super passionate and excited about it. So he's definitely going to be motivated to do a lot for this team, work really hard, and do a great job. So I just wanted to add that at the end. But anyway, that's kind of my take on the Liquid side of things. I'll probably do a separate video on the Made in Brazil side of things whenever all that stuff starts to come out. Hope you enjoy this video and some of the, kind of insight I was able to give from some kind of stuff I've heard from the inside, the grapevine, or whatever you want to say, and just kind of add my own analysis to it. If you did, please follow, subscribe for more content. Thanks so much. Catch you next time.